in today's session, we'll be looking at how we can check the health of a Revit project file. By health, I mean how well it's been set up and what key indicators we can look for to see what needs to be corrected, what's been done well. Now, to date, there have been a number of utilities within ARUtils that will assist you in exploring a project file. For example, we might want to isolate work sets and see how those work sets have been used. We might want to look at design options and see how they've been used. We then also have a range of other things such as excessively large families that might be slowing down our project. So there's a whole range of these types of things that to date ARUtils has already looked at, but now these have all been combined into a single user interface. So under the Utils pull down, we have a number of commands. We've got check performance. This actually does a performance check of your model based on commands created by the Revit team. This just puts it into a nice usable form for you. And we also have the health check command. So this will check the health of our project. So let's just fire that up. Now, we've previously done a scan on this file, so we're given the option just to reload the last scan. So let's just say yes at this point. Okay, so we now get our project health check window, and you'll see that we've got a number of categories that are being checked, and we've got some bars that are indicating roughly how healthy our project is. Now, all of these indicators are open for you to be able to define what's important to you as far as your projects are concerned. So we've got warnings, we've got groups, so how many groups are in your project, and how many specifically do we have that have one instance of a group or have no instances of a group that's been placed. We also have an indicator for views not on sheets, another one for views that have no template applied. Good modelling would typically have us having views that have a template applied. Once again though, you can set what's important for you, and here you can see views no template. You've got 573 issue items out of a total interest group of 1298 elements. So 573 of our views don't have templates applied. We've then also got imports. So here we've got 18 imports in use. So in-place families, we're very low. Unplaced rooms is also very low. We've also got quite a few views where categories have been overridden. We've got quite a few model lines that are being used. So there's 435 model lines that are in use. Once again, you can decide what's important to you. Type marks, how many items do we have that have no type marks applied? And finally, we have families. So how many families do we have that are of what seems an excessive size? Once again, you can set what is excessive as far as you're concerned. Now, apart from the bars tab, we also have a data tab, and this presents some extra information. It provides us with the name of the file that's been checked, how many elements are in it, how many element types, whether there are linked documents, whether there are work sets. If I wanted to open up one of these work sets, I can simply click on it and it will take me to that work set and I can see what elements are in it. We do also have the number of elements that are in particular work sets. So you can see that most of our elements are in the base building work set and the fit out work set, and then there's some other work sets. Below this we have that there are no design options, and we then have a representation of the bar information from the bars tab, and it gives us the salient element counts, and this is used if we do a multi-project health check. So this information will get written into an Excel file, and we can then review multiple files and the issues that are there. Also at the bottom we have a number of families that exceed our set limit for what's the smallest file size that we should consider, and in this case we've set it to 350 kilobytes. Okay, let's go back to the bars tab. So we've got our list of various things that we can address the issues for. So all of these will take you to a command that either previously existed in ARUtils or has been created specifically with the Project Health Check command in mind. Let's go to clean up our views. So this addresses the issue of views that aren't on sheets. So at some stage you won't want to have many views that aren't on sheets in your project. So we'll go to cleanup, and pops up our cleanup project views command, and we'll just say delete. So we'll just click delete because it'll bring up a list of what views aren't on sheets, and it's just working through our project. So some of these commands will run faster than others. So we've now got quite a list of views that aren't on sheets, and so we seem to have some demolition plans, but the simplest thing at this point is just to hit delete, and that should have absolutely no effect on any of our sheets. Let's just click delete. It now processes those. So all of the items that were inspected for issues have an associated command that works better or less strongly than other commands. So not everything can be fixed with simple button presses. And you'll see now that our views is showing green rather than the orange that it was before. So the black line shows us where we're at, the red line shows us where issues will appear as red. So the line above, we've got imports. Here we've got the black line showing well past that red line. Now you're probably wondering how we actually define what's critical and what isn't critical. So I'll go into opening up the Health Check settings command. Okay, so let's just close our Health Check dialog and open up the Health Check settings. So this is basically just an Excel file which has a number of tabs in it. So each of these tabs defines a different definition. So we might have different configurations for different project types. Perhaps we do domestic work and fit out work. So therefore what's critical in one type of file may not be critical in another type of file. So down here we've got the label column. Now these are hard-coded names for the different types of checks that will be done, whether we're checking for warnings or groups. And probably the best way to work out what each one actually means is to read the comment. So with warnings, it's based on the number of warnings versus the total number of elements. So our next column specifies whether it's a percent or a maximum value, or whether it's disabled. So most of the commands or rules are based on a percent, and that could be a percent of all the elements or a percent of the elements that belong to that category. For example, with views, we'll compare the number of views that are not on sheets to the total number of views that could be on sheets. So it's always more relevant to compare typically the number of items relative to their category, but that's not always the case. For example, model curves or model lines can be checked as a percent of all the elements that are in your project. Now, the next column is the number or percent value. So when this is set to percent, then this represents 1% of, in this case, all the elements that are in your project. So you can specify various levels that you determine are basically undesirable within your project types. For some things, such as imports, you might just set it to a maximum value. So we reckon that 10 is going to be a fairly ordinary number of imports to have in our particular projects. The final value here is based on the minimum bar end value. So this basically says, say for imports, that our total bar will represent a minimum of 30 items. That way it shows how far along the bar we actually get, because our number value of 10 will appear 1/3 away along that bar. Let's just have a closer look back at our bar. So we've said that 10 is our critical value for imports, and in this case we've said that 30 is our minimum bar value. So we in fact have probably about 20 imports. If I just hover over this, you'll see it says you've got 18 issue items. So you can see how our minimum bar value works, and also our critical value works. But whenever we exceed that critical value, our bar will turn red, and it's not until we get below that red bar that our bar appears green or orange, for example. Now let's just go back into our health check settings file. So we've seen a little bit on how the minimum bar end value works, and now probably the only other item of note is the families health check, and in that we have some extra parameters that we can use. We can say what size is critical for our families, and this is in kilobytes. Now when the health check routine checks families, it actually saves families off to disk. It only saves model families. It doesn't bother with tag families because they're probably going to be fairly small anyway. But all of these routines, health check routines or rules, take a certain amount of time to be run, and anything that we can do that speeds up the processing and also stops us from having false positives. So a false positive, for example, might be that it says standard door is too big. However, standard door is a family that you have in your library, and therefore you can specify if a family of the same name is found in my library, then just ignore it for the sake of checking the size. So we can put in the top of our family libraries path for our system. The other thing that you can also do is have a parameter that is checked for a value. So in this case we've got if the Omni class number is not set to nothing or null, then ignore those items. So anything that we've spent the time on to set an Omni class number, we might consider that that has sufficient checking. The other thing we could do is say that company name equals our company name. So where you're using these, you'll need to check out help in the file on filtering using parameters. Now, as you've seen, there are some project health checks that take longer to run than others. For example, checking category overrides on each view can take quite a while. So you may want to include that in a more intensive scan. So you would only have that enabled in a particular configuration. So if we go back to our health check settings file, we could, for example, say, let's disable the category overridden one. And I should point out, it only checks if a category has been overridden other than by a template. So if a template is overriding a category, that's okay and not an issue. Whereas if it's overridden in a unique way, then that is deemed an issue. So we can either elect to say a command is disabled, or we can simply delete those lines from the file. Always best to keep one page or one configuration that has all of the items in there. So often using disabled is a much better way to go. Now, for completeness, the last thing that we want to look at is the multi-health check. So let's just open up that dialog. This basically allows us to process multiple files, and therefore a BIM manager can set this running and come back in an hour or a couple of hours to receive a complete report. Now, we need to set where our project files are located, and this could be a project folder, or it could be the top of all your project folders, as you've got two options. One says process subdirectories as well, so it can just scan through everything. We also have the option of just selecting files from the list of files that are in those folders. So there might be certain ones that we want to look at, but others that we don't. So we can elect to export warnings, audit the files. So when we have audit and purge enabled, the files are actually saved as they're opened and processed. So this can be a quick way of auditing and purging a lot of your files. Now, the other thing, as mentioned before, families can take quite a while to export. So anything that we can do that speeds up that process can be beneficial. So we may not be interested in exporting families, so we can just say, don't even consider them. Admittedly, if we didn't have the family export option within the definition that we use, then no family export would take place anyway. We have two other options though. There's export once, which therefore uses a single folder, and the first time the command encounters a family, it will write out that family. But if it then processes another project that has the same family, it will not export that again. The other option, of course, is to export all, and with export all, each project file has a folder created in the folder it resides in. So let's just hit check. Alright, so it comes up with a file selector, and we can just pick the files that we want to process. So I'll just pick a few of those, And you'll notice that we have a filter applied. In this case, I'm just looking for 2020 files. So we've picked 3 files. We'll go OK. And it wants us to pick which configuration to use. It'll only do this the one time. We'll say large. And it's now just processing each of those files. So we'll just come back in a bit once that's done. Okay, so our report file has now opened, and you can see we've got a lot of the information that we received on the data page of our projects. So we can see what work sets are there. We have color coding here just to indicate what things are issues and what things are fine. So we can see that we've got quite a few warnings. We got way too many imports. So we very quickly get an overview, and we can go back and using this to open the various files that have the biggest issues and then address those issues. So hopefully you can see that with the health check and multi-health check routines, it's a very quick process for you to determine what of your files have issues, and those issues are unique to your company or to you. You can look at specifically what's causing a problem. Now, as much as possible, the various health check rules cover a wide range of possible faults within a project. They can't, however, check things like naming conventions. So there are some things that can be checked and some things that can't be checked. If you find that we haven't covered a particular issue that you face, then please let us know, and there's every chance we'll be able to implement that health check specifically for your needs. There'll be no extra cost, it'll just come as part of your subscription for the product. So thank you all for your attention, and see you all next time.